I mean, imagine you have more money than entire nations.
Right.
You can buy private islands. You could literally fly to space whenever you are bored. Now, just imagine choosing to bypass all of that.
It's hard to even picture.
Right. Imagine deciding instead to sleep on a filthy, oil-stained factory floor.
Yeah, right under those lights.
Exactly. The blinding industrial fluorescent lights that absolutely never turn off. You have these massive, loud stamping presses literally shaking the ground beneath you. Workers are moving around you all night long. There is no soft bed. There is no luxury suite. There's no privacy at all.
Oh, none.
There's just a worn-out couch, a thin sleeping bag, or, sometimes just the bare, vibrating concrete.
And to any rational outside observer, that scenario doesn't just look uncomfortable. It looks like a profound psychological collapse.
It looks completely insane.
Yeah, it really does.
But in this deep dive, that is exactly the reality we are going to dissect today. Because our mission is to strip away the glossy, retrospective magazine covers and look directly at the brutal, uncomfortable truth of extreme dedication.
The actual reality on the ground.
Yes, we are pulling from our own historical reality, the internal data, and our actual lived experiences of that era to explore the absolute psychological breaking points that are required to cheat corporate death.
It's a heavy topic.
It is. We are going to examine what actually happens to the human mind and to an entire workforce when survival is genuinely on the line.
And I think we really have to start with the phrasing that defines this specific period in 2017.
Okay, yeah.
Internally and externally, it was universally referred to as production hell. And we need to pause on the nuance of that vocabulary for a second.
Let's do it.
Because we didn't call it a production crisis or a manufacturing delay or a supply chain bottleneck. We use the word hell.
Right, which is a very loaded word.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a very specific, visceral intent behind that word choice. A crisis is an event you manage, right? But hell is an inexorable crucible.
Inexorable. I like that word.
Yeah, inexorable meaning, impossible to stop or prevent. It implies this state of active, relentless suffering where the heat just keeps rising.
The pressure just compresses you.
Right, and you cannot simply step out of the room to take a breath. You are trapped in it.
You don't manage hell with a spreadsheet.
No, you don't.
You survive it, or it consumes you entirely. And so I really want to ask you, the listener, as you join us for this deep dive, what would you do?
It's the ultimate question.
It is. If the architecture of everything you had built was actively burning down and your own professional or financial survival was genuinely on the line, what extreme measures would you take?
Would you demand your standard of living?
Right. Or would you walk directly into the fire?
And, I can articulate exactly what the heat of that fire feels like. Because in 2017, that production hell was my literal reality.
You were right in the center of it.
I was. We had just launched the Model 3. And look, we can skip the basic history lesson. I think everyone knows the transition we were attempting. We were moving from low-volume luxury to mass market.
Yeah, aiming to rival the massive legacy automakers.
Exactly. But we weren't just fighting traditional supply chain issues. We were fighting the brutal physics of our own hubris.
Oh, wow. That's a strong way to put it.
It's the truth. We fell into the trap of over-automation.
Which means, basically, you try to automate processes that human beings are naturally incredibly efficient at, while robots are, well, notoriously clumsy.
Precisely. We had this one machine, we called it the Fluff Bot.
The Fluff Bot.
Yeah, its entire purpose was literally just to pick up a piece of fiberglass mat and place it over the battery pack for sound insulation.
Which should sound so simple.
It is. A human hand can do this in 2 seconds without even looking. But a robot relies on computer vision. It lacks that tactile feedback.
So it can't feel when the material bends.
Exactly. The fiberglass was unpredictable, right? It would fold, it would slip, and the Sluffbot would just freeze.
Oh, man.
My robots failed. My production lines simply ground to a halt. We could not move the chassis down the line, and every single hour of delay meant I was burning millions of dollars.
Millions!
Millions evaporating every single hour.
That is That's hard to even
It
comprehend.
was terrifying. Analysts were practically euphoric, publicly predicting that we would run out of cash within months. I was staring directly at the near-death experience of my entire company.
Okay, and I have to challenge you on this. If you are bleeding capital at that rate, staring down corporate death, setting up a sleeping bag under a desk on the factory floor sounds less like leadership and more like, I don't know, panic-induced micromanagement.
Hmm. I can see why people think that.
Right. Because why not run the macro strategy from a boardroom? Most leaders in your position would isolate themselves. They sit in these high-level war rooms. They study financial burn rates. They manage the nervous board of
Yeah,
directors.
that's the standard playbook.
Yep. So why sacrifice the cognitive distance that a boardroom provides to go sleep in the dirt?
Well, because cognitive distance is an absolute illusion when the machine is bleeding out.
How so?
You cannot diagnose a micro-inefficiency in a robotic arm from a leather chair in a boardroom. You just can't. But more importantly, it was driven by a concept I call the credibility of suffering.
Credibility of suffering. Break that down for me.
If a CEO is living comfortably, going home to a mansion, taking warm showers, while the workers on the floor are sweating and panicking to save the company, respect evaporates instantly,
They just see you as disconnected.
completely disconnected. I needed to fundamentally alter the psychology of that building. So I weaponized my own discomfort. I engineered a situation where my standard of living was noticeably worse than everyone else's.
So you basically wanted the visual of your own misery to be inescapable.
I needed it to be inescapable
Yeah.
because suffering creates credibility. When I was walking between those stalled stamping presses at 2 a.m., when I was sleeping on that floor in the exact same clothes I wore the day before my team saw it,
And that changes things for them.
it totally intercepts the natural human instinct to complain.
Yeah.
When the boss is visibly suffering more than the workforce, this very powerful psychological shift occurs.
Right. The internal monologue of the worker changes. It goes from, why am I being pushed this hard, to, well, if the billionaire hasn't given up and gone home to his mansion.
I certainly can't quit either.
Exactly.
What you are describing is really the absolute extreme edge of having skin in the game.
Yes.
We hear that phrase constantly in modern business culture, but it's almost always misused.
Oh, completely watered down.
Right. People
Yeah.
think having skin in the game just means you're invested, like you own equity, or your bonus is tied to a quarterly target.
Which is just basic financial incentive.
Exactly. But being invested is not the same as being exposed. You are talking about being entirely exposed to the blast radius of failure.
Yes. The distinction between investment and exposure is the core of the whole dynamic. In a traditional corporate hierarchy, the executive is insulated from the physical reality of a failure. They have a golden parachute.
Right. So I stripped away the insulation entirely.
And from a psychological perspective, human beings are deeply hardwired for mirroring. We unconsciously adopt the posture, the urgency, and the emotional frequency of the leaders we observe.
We really do.
You weren't just paying them a salary anymore. You were converting a workforce into a team in a trench.
That was the goal.
But I feel like we need a better framework to understand this than the old, tired cliches. People always use that ancient maritime metaphor, the captain is the last to leave a sinking ship.
Yeah, I hate that one.
Right, because it implies a passive resignation to drowning, like you're just standing there saluting while it goes down. That wasn't what was happening on the floor.
No, not at all.
Uh-huh.
You're right. The maritime metaphor implies a defensive posture. A much more accurate mechanistic analogy is thermal runaway in a high-density battery architecture.
Oh, that's interesting. Let's explore that.
So in a battery pack, if one individual cell is subjected to extreme stress and gets critically hot, it doesn't just fail in isolation,
It spreads.
right? It transfers that kinetic energy to the adjacent cells. It cascades. It accelerates until the entire pack ignites.
Wow.
I needed to be the thermal catalyst on that factory floor. If my baseline temperature was sheer panic, relentless motion, and absolute focus, that energy would cascade to the line managers.
And from the line managers to the technicians.
Exactly. I had to become the source of the thermal runaway.
Which brings us to the operational reality of that thermal runaway, specifically your concept of radical focus.
Yeah.
You sacrificed your home, your bed, and honestly, your basic human sanity. And your primary justification for moving into the factory was to eliminate a 2-hour daily commute.
1 hour driving to the plant, 1 hour driving back.
See, I have to challenge the fundamental logic of this. To a normal person, losing 2 hours to a commute is just, well, it's a podcast and a cup of coffee.
Sure, in normal circumstances.
Right. Demolishing your entire standard of living and embracing total asceticism just to save 2 hours seems utterly disproportionate.
I get that. But it only seems disproportionate if you fail to understand the brutal math of a linear manufacturing bottleneck.
Explain the math, then.
Time, not capital, is the ultimate and unforgiving resource. In a normal job, a 2-hour commute is friction, but it's not fatal. But in a crisis where a single choke point is holding up an entire mass production line, you have to measure time in thousands of units.
But let's look at the biology of that radical focus, right? Let's look at the human machine. Sleep deprivation systematically destroys the prefrontal cortex.
It does, I won't deny that.
You lose executive function, your cortisol spikes, your ability to regulate emotion just disintegrates. So were you actually making mathematically sound engineering decisions at 3 a.m. on a concrete floor? Or were you just engaging in performance art, creating this highly visible theater of hard work while potentially making really expensive, fatigued mistakes?
That is a fair critique of the biological cost, absolutely. But it ignores the reality of proximity. Yes, I wasn't doing high-level calculus at 3 a.m. I was observing physical physics. If I am sleeping under the desk, I can hear the cadence of the machinery.
You can hear if something is off.
Exactly. I can wake up, walk 30 feet, and watch the fluff bot fail with my own eyes. I could instantly authorize a software engineer to rewrite the computer vision code right then and there.
Rather than waiting for a report the next day.
Right. If I am sitting in traffic on the highway, that decision takes 3 hours, a chain of emails, and a status meeting. 2 hours saved wasn't just time recovered. It was the margin between fixing the bottleneck before the morning shift or burning another $10 million.
Wow.
So I removed the concept of the commute entirely. My office became the assembly line. It was a complete paradigm shift into absolute utility.
You essentially viewed your own body as just another piece of machinery that needed to be optimized for the line.
I had to. It was the only logical equation for survival at that point.
Okay, but we need to talk about the blast radius of that thermal runaway you initiated. We have to address the fallout. Because while human nature does mirror leadership, and we have seen this historically, where Apple reflected the intense perfectionism of Steve Jobs, or Amazon mirrored the relentless, algorithm-driven efficiency of Jeff Bezos, your company mirrored your extreme intensity.
Yes.
And that intensity has a heavy, heavy toll.
It demands an enormous, undeniable sacrifice.
I know it does. And I'm not speaking in abstracts here. I have to be completely honest, and this is still honestly visceral for me to talk about.
I know.
But I lived through those 100-hour weeks. I was on that floor with you.
I remember the state of the workforce during those months. It was intense.
Intense is an understatement. You know that while the narrative of the CEO sleeping on the floor sounds heroic in a retrospective biography, from the ground up, it was sheer brutality.
Right, yeah.
I watched my colleagues completely hollow out. I felt the dissonance in my own body. Waking up at 4 a.m., having the constant vibration of the machinery in my head, even when I tried to sleep.
It never really stopped.
Never. The absolute destruction of my personal relationships. You engineered a thermal runaway, but you can't control the fire once it starts.
No, you can't.
Working those 100-hour weeks severely damaged my mental and physical health. The exhaustion was absolute. You say we became a team in a trench, but in a trench, there are massive casualties.
There are.
And eventually, well, I was one of them. I broke. I couldn't survive your crucible, and I quit.
I hear that. And I don't dispute a single word of your experience. I really don't.
It was just so much.
I saw it happening. I saw brilliant engineers crying in stairwells. I saw the physical degradation of the people trying to save the company alongside me. I'm not blind to that cost.
So I have to press you on this then, because it raises the most profoundly important high-stakes question of modern ambition.
Okay.
Is this level of extreme dedication actually a prerequisite for paradigm-shifting success? Or is it simply the pathology of an obsessive founder, a specific kind of, well, toxic personality type, projecting their own relentless anxiety onto a workforce and pushing everyone way too far?
That is the ultimate philosophical conflict of human achievement.
It really is.
And I will concede, without hesitation, that sleeping on factory floors and demanding 100-hour weeks is not healthy. Operating at that frequency causes severe, sometimes permanent biological and psychological damage.
It absolutely does.
But if we look objectively at the historical data, if we look at how actual entrenched paradigms are broken, there is no comfortable answer.
What do you mean?
The deeply uncomfortable truth is that almost every breakthrough leap in human industry has been forged strictly in these crucibles of unreasonable pressure.
So you are arguing that the extremity, the toxicity even, is a feature, not a bug.
I'm arguing physics.
Physics.
Yes. When you are trying to do something that has never been done, like scaling a mass-market electric vehicle to dethrone a century of entrenched monopolistic gasoline infrastructure,
Yeah.
you are trying to escape a massive gravitational pull.
Okay, I follow you.
To escape gravity, you need escape velocity.
Huh?
And escape velocity is violent. It shakes the vehicle to its core.
Right.
Normal standards of work-life balance, normal boundaries, they simply do not possess the efficacy, the kinetic energy required to achieve that velocity. If we had operated at a healthy, balanced pace, we would have been bankrupt in 6 weeks.
So you're saying the alternative to the suffering wasn't a healthy company, the alternative was a dead company.
Exactly. The alternative was extinction.
Yet, for all the casualties, for all the people like me who walked away broken by the pace, the physics of that extreme pressure did eventually yield a diamond.
It did.
Because we have to look at the outcome. The narrative didn't end with bankruptcy.
No, it didn't. By stripping away the automation that didn't work, by living on the line and fixing those micro inefficiencies in real time, the Model 3 assembly line finally stabilized.
The turnaround was just staggering. You went from stalled robots and a failing fluff bot to producing thousands of cars every single week.
Yes. The chassis finally started moving.
You proved the manufacturing concept. You proved that mass-market electric vehicles could actually be built at scale.
We did. And it didn't just survive, it completely altered the automotive landscape.
Oh, fundamentally. The Model 3 became one of the best-selling vehicles in the entire world, electric or otherwise.
Right?
A company that was literally weeks away from total insolvency experienced a transformation so severe that at certain points your market capitalization exceeded the combined value of traditional giants like Toyota, Ford, and General Motors.
And it's important to note that that DNA, that specific methodology of relentless problem solving, didn't remain isolated in the automotive sector.
No, it spread.
That exact same approach to dismantling impossible bottlenecks is what drives the breakthrough innovations we see in private space exploration.
Right, like with SpaceX.
Exactly. Getting a reusable rocket to land itself on a drone ship in the middle of the ocean requires the exact same extreme dedication, the exact same refusal to accept traditional limitations.
So synthesizing all of this, the data, the psychological mechanisms, the human cost, what does this reveal about our broader culture?
That's the real question.
I think the real lesson here is a massive, uncomfortable contradiction to what we are sold every single day.
How so?
Well, in modern culture, success is falsely advertised. It is heavily sanitized. It's sold to us as an aesthetic, you know?
No, absolutely.
We are told that top-tier success looks like fast cars, corner offices, and a perfectly balanced lifestyle where your boundaries are always respected.
But that is the marketing of success, not the reality of achievement.
Exactly. The reality looks like absolute grit. It looks like sleepless nights under blinding fluorescent lights.
Yeah.
It looks like worn-out couches, failed experiments, damaged relationships, and deeply stressful, agonizing decisions. Most people claim they want to change the world or they want extraordinary success, but what they really want is comfort.
They prioritize safety.
They do. And what this deep dive clearly demonstrates is that extreme builders simply operate on an entirely different frequency. They view comfort as the enemy of progress.
Because when survival is on the line, or when you're trying to bend the future to your will, comfort has to evaporate.
It has to.
Your entire cognitive existence becomes focused on one singular, relentless question: how do we solve the immediate problem in front of us?
Right.
That level of radical focus is exceedingly rare, but it is the primary engine behind every real structural innovation in history.
It is the brutal cost of entry. So I want to turn this directly back to you, listening right now. Look closely at your own life, your own career, or the project you are building.
What does your battlefield look like?
Exactly. Are you demanding extreme, top-tier, paradigm-shifting results while secretly clinging to your comfortable, insulated routines?
Are you expecting escape velocity while refusing to endure the vibration?
Because success rarely comes from the safe path. It usually comes from the people who are willing to expose themselves to a level of risk and discomfort that everyone else correctly identifies as unreasonable.
And the overarching truth of the factory floor isn't really about sleep deprivation.
Yeah.
And it certainly isn't about glamorizing suffering for the sake of it. It's about a single defining threshold.
Which is?
When your ultimate survival is at stake, what are you genuinely willing to sacrifice that the rest of the world thinks is completely irrational? Because when the margin of error drops to zero, the only difference between massive public failure and extraordinary world-changing success is simply the person who refuses to leave the battlefield.
Until next time, let's succeed together.